going to do a shrimp called Nix's epoxy shrimp. What sort of sets this one apart from a lot of other shrimps is the fact that it uses a clear straw for the carapace. So it's quite realistic looking. I was actually asked by someone through my blog for the recipe for this one, and it's really old fly. I couldn't actually find it. I had done a step-by-step once before, so I thought, okay, I'll do a video. So it's been a really good fly. That's it there. A really good fly for me around the oyster leases. You throw it in on an intermediate line around the posts or between the racks and just let it slowly drift down. Quite often the fish will take it on the drop. You'll notice it's got a weed guard on it, which is actually a snag guard, so you can actually throw it up against the posts and stuff without it hooking onto the post. So anyway, we'll run through how to make it. As I said, it's been a pretty good fly for the brim. So this one is a size 4, which is about the usual size I tie them. So the ingredients, obviously the weed guard, which is mono, 20 pound. The hook is in this case, a Daiichi 2546 number 4. We used to tie them on mustard 34007s because that was about the only stainless steel hook around at the time we were tying these, which is, geez, got to be easily 15 to 18 years ago now. The other materials, obviously mono eyes, burnt mono. The back is a clear drinking straw, which are going to become rarer than dodo shit soon. You know, with the biodegradable straw starting to become more and more popular. Dubbing, so I'm using in this case Antron, which is what the original fly was tied out of. But the other one I find quite good is the BMS blend from Tywell, which I believe you can still get. Calf tail, so that's just olive calf tail, and some wire, whichever colour you want to use, and then just crystal flash, and in this case I'm going to use olive. So first thing you'll notice, I've pretty much wrapped the whole shank of the hook in thread. What I've done is I've crushed the end of some 20 pound mono, which I'm going to tie on. Now crushing it holds it in on the hook a lot firmer, so it's a lot harder to pull out. And you think about where these are going to be thrown in amongst oyster leases and, you know, rocks and all those sorts of things. You need to make sure this fly is fairly tough. So I'll also be using head cement and epoxy as we go through tying this fly. So that's it. So the weed guard is just single strand tied in, start it down the bend of the hook, so that it can come back around up the front. So the next thing to do is take some, in this case BMS dubbing, not too much, just enough to make a small ball at that bend there. So get that onto the thread like that, and then we'll bring that forward and try and get it right on the bend of the hook, like that. Right, and the next piece is some calf tail, and this basically just creates the mouth parts for the shrimp. Pretty straightforward. So all I'm going to do is just get any of the loose fluffy bits out of the calf tail and tie that in so it's just sticking forward to the hook bend. And you can see straight away that looks you know, quite shrimpy or buggy, and the dubbing ball pushes it up slightly, so you can see that angles up away from the hook shank, which is what you want with that. At this point you can tie in some feelers if you want to put some feelers on, or antennae. The best thing to use is super hair, supreme hair, or unique hair. You know, those stiff curly sort of fibers are quite good. I'm not going to do that on this particular one. And usually I don't. You know, the ones we use have usually not had any feelers or anything like that on them, so whatever you prefer. But I am going to put a little bit of crystal flash in up front here, just a few strands, just to give a little bit of flash. So when we were using these the most, it was at night time around the leases, so that little bit of flash does pick up a little bit of whatever light there is around the oysters, and sometimes that can, you know, attract a bite. So, you know, with these we sort of just cast them in up around the post, as I said, so you get on the inside of the post where the tide is pushing the post, and you've got that little you know, section that's out of the current. That's usually where we focus them and just let them sort of sink down. Okay, so that's the crystal flash. Now I'm going to dub another ball with the orange just behind that. Again, it doesn't need to be huge. So I'm going to bring that so it meets up with the other ball that I've already got in place, like so. And bring the thread just back past there. Right. So that's to that point. So then the next step is to put some eyes on, and like I said, I'm just using these burnt mono eyes that I make. There are instructions on how to make those on the website. I mean, if you want to buy eyes, by all means go and buy them, but the thing I like about the burnt mono eyes that I make myself is I can make them to whatever size I want, and for this particular fly I like a fairly decent eye, so it really sort of sticks out. And red seemed to have been the best colour for the eyes too, in the flies we tied. I don't know, again, because we were fishing at night, maybe the red just gives it that little bit of extra colour. But yeah. Make sure they're lined up. Right, so if I turn that round, you can see where the eyes are in place, and that dubbing ball we just put in helps push the eyes out away from the body of the fly itself. Right, so now clip off the excess mono. So those eyes I just use are on about 20 pound mono, for anyone that's wondering what size mono that is. I usually tie them between you know, 12 to 40 pound, depending on the size of the eye I want at the end. The higher the breaking strain of the mono, the bigger the eye. Alright, so that's the eye in. So the next step is to put the wire on. Like I said, use whatever wire you wish to use. In this case I'm going to use a little bit of this olive wire because the shrimp itself is olive. So I'm using about, I don't know, what's that, about 4 inches. And we're going to tie that to the side of the hook, because you don't want to put it on the top, because you want it to come straight around the straw once the straw is tied on. So you'll see that when we get to that point. Wrap that back. Put that there, that holds it out of the road. So there is that. Now I'm just going to head cement that piece section to hold the wire on, hold the eyes in place, as well as the mono. Alright, so this is just again Tyrwell head set. I don't think you can get that anymore, but whatever head cement you've got, or you could use one of the thin epoxies like Bone Dry from Solar Res, or one of those. Alright, so we'll bring that back up to just before the eyes. And now I'm going to start the dubbing of the body. So I'm going to do one more piece of orange, because it's the, you know, colour I think that, you know, it's like a hot spot on the fly. Again, I think it attracts the fish. Looks a bit like a spawning shrimp. So we'll get that. Now what we've got to try and do here is taper the body a little bit. So you want it thicker at the front and thinning out towards the back. Now we'll start with the olive. So this is just a light olive antron. use whatever dubbing you've got, as long as it's a fairly soft dubbing. Get that on there. And you can see we're sort of tapering towards the back of the hook like that. So there's your taper. Alright, so a couple of things now. The next bit is optional. What you can do is take some of your olive dubbing, just a little bit. Try and sort of match the ends up as much as you can and lay it over the fly like that, and that helps you with your legs later on. So you can see that the leg's sticking down. Now for the back of the fly, the original actually had crystal flash running up the back, but we've also done them with glitter. So actually use 5 minutes epoxy as you're doing the carapace of the shell and add glitter to it. I'm just going to go with the crystal flash for, you know, for speed. So this is just going to run across the back all the way up, so it'll be actually under the clear straw. Again, it just gives it a little bit of flash. All right, so that's that in. Now the straw itself. So what you do is you crimp the straw fairly tightly in half and then cut it to the shape of the shrimp. So you see point at the front, flat at the back. All right, so we take that, we're going to run it up and just bring the point just past the eyes. All right, so that's where we want it. Now I'm going to grab there where the hook eye was, and what I'm going to do is just cut a little slit in it. And again, this is optional. You can just tie it off at the end if you want to. This is just a better way, I find, of securing the straw. Alright, so now I've got that slit. I can find it, and get that hook eye through it, hopefully. There we go, hook eye is through the slit in the straw. Alright, and now that will become a lot easier to tie off, if you can see that. Now you can also leave that bit of straw hanging there like the tail of the shrimp if you wish to. Alright, next bit is to take your wire, alright, and then start winding it back. Sort of separate some of this dubbing that's hanging down as much as you can, so you're not trapping it all in the wire as you come back. Try and, you know, obviously try and get the wire reasonably evenly spaced, and then get it smaller spacings as you get towards the back of the hook. And then once you're here, you can again tie that off. Alright, and then clean that piece of wire off with some old scissors. You can snap it off if you want, but I never trust myself, so. Alright, so like I said, this tail piece here is optional, and I'm actually going to cut it off. Alright, that's that. Just clean that up a little bit. Alright, so that's that in place. Alright, so the only thing left really is obviously the epoxy on the back. I'm going to tease that dubbing out a little bit at the end, but I'm just going to now quickly run the weed guard. So I want it about there. Alright, now what I do is actually get the pliers and squish that mono down, but roughly where I want it to sit. Then I'm going to feed the mono through the eye of the hook, and then what you'll see is where I've squashed it, it'll actually bend up nice and flat, and I can tie that off like that. And because it's also squashed, it takes up no or very little space in the eye of the hook, so you can still get your leader through. All right, now before I whip finish, I'm just going to put a little bit of this epoxy or head cement, whatever you've got here. Set that just to stop things coming undone. Alright, get that back here, and then a couple of whip finish. And again, you've got to do another coat of epoxy anyway. That's basically the fly. So as I said, all I'm going to really do now is just start to tease some of the dubbing out from in here, just to make it a bit leggy like that. And what the dubbing does, you know, the reason I put that little bit of overlay in is it makes the shrimps drift down a little bit slower. So if you don't want it such a fast drift, don't make the legs as long, or you know, don't fluff out the dubbing, tease it out as much. So that's it. All that's left is just an epoxy coat over the back, and you're done. Hope that helps. Good luck.